Hello, everyone. This is Ellie Crumpholtz with the Freckle Education team. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's In My Classroom webinar. Before we get started, I do want to confirm that you can actually see the screen and indeed hear my voice. So I'm going to ask you all to do me a quick favor. You'll notice at the bottom of your own screen, there's a chat box. Go ahead and find that dialog box and type in the word piggy, as in JT, our piggy mascot, and that'll let me know that it's safe to proceed. Great, the piggies are rolling in here, so it is safe to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Ellie Crumpholtz. I'm part of the Freckle Education team, and I oversee our ambassador program. And today we are bringing you a very special installment of our In My Classroom series featuring Freckle Ambassador Laura DeMars. I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Laura for a year now, and she is absolutely fantastic. This session she shared at our virtual workshop for 3 to 5 educators just last month, and it received rave reviews, and you begged for us to bring it back. And so we're bringing you a special adaptation of that same presentation today. So it's an encore of sorts, and we're so excited to share it with you. Before I hand it over to Laura, please note that you can drop your questions and comments into that chat box. That's the same dialog box that you used to type in the word piggy. So feel free to drop those there throughout the session, and then we'll tackle those at the end. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to hand it over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Ellie, for that wonderful introduction. So I am so excited to be here to talk a little bit about goal setting and engaging your learners while using Freckle in your classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and pop on to my next slide here. Just a little bit about me. I am a 4th grade teacher in rural California. I've been using Freckle, believe it or not, for almost 6 years now in my classroom. And I am an implementation specialist for Freckle. So that means that I do a lot of talking about Freckle with teachers and working with other people all across the country to be able to help them use Freckle in their classroom. But I do use it in my classroom every single day. And right now I am teaching 4th grade, but I have worked with students all the way from kindergarten all the way to 8th grade using Freckle in the classroom fairly regularly. Also, just so you do know, I am in a self-contained classroom right now with a very large class. Currently, I actually have 37 students in my classroom all day, every day. But any of these strategies can be used in a classroom where you're seeing multiple groups of students or in a self-contained classroom like I have. I also am one-to-one with iPads in my classroom, but these strategies, you don't have to have a device for every student. And so there's a couple things that I can share. I've used these strategies for the last few years, and our technology has varied throughout that time. So you don't necessarily need to be one-to-one, but I do use Freckle in my classroom with devices one-to-one in my classroom every day. So one little thing that I wanted to mention, there's a lot of programs that include different techniques, and you can set goals with students, but one of the reasons why I love Freckle, and Freckle is a very strong program, is that it's student-centered. And so today when I'm talking, I really am wanting to have students set goals. So when I'm talking about goal setting, it's not necessarily the teacher setting goals for those students, because we all have goals. Ideally, we would want our students to be ready to succeed for the next grade going on, or their future career, or even just the next week, to be prepared and know what they need to know for the upcoming lessons. But what I love about Freckle is that it's really student-centered, and there are features within the program that allow students to become kind of the masters of their own goals and really start controlling their own learning. Also, I really love using the goal setting feature in Freckle to understand how students are mastering the concept, but also me as the teacher being able to focus instruction to meet the needs of each one of my students. So goal setting. when we talk about goal setting, it's one of these kind of terms, and I'm hearing a lot more in the education realm of having students set goals. But why is it important? Now, with Freckle, we have a lot of abilities for students to be able to access content in all different areas, pretty much anytime they would like. And so students can work through their own content at their own level, but allowing us to really focus the learning for students and helping them see how to meet goals and why making progress is so important allows them to really be owners and masters of their own learning. Also, setting goals for students really increases engagement. I don't know about you, but when I'm exercising or I'm kind of just going out and running every day, I'm not necessarily as um, determined or kind of cognizant of how my pace is and those types of things. But when you might be training for something like a marathon, you actually have a specific goal in mind, and that might make your training more important. Now, that's also the same in the classroom. Students love to learn. Most students, when presented with new knowledge, they love to acquire new things, and not necessarily the content we want them to learn, but they do love to learn. And so when you're having students make a goal, even something as simple as earning a certain number of coins, that's going to be focusing them on really paying attention to what they're doing and being really cognizant of their time. So that's something that I will be talking a little bit further, but engaging those students and creating goals really creates this a really nice feedback loop into their actual learning. Also, it allows them to be able to monitor their own progress. This is a really great skill as your students get older, as well as becoming adults. They want to make sure that they're making progress on any target that they want to achieve. And then also it creates a great opportunity for celebration. And I'm going to include some strategies to help celebrate that growth that are really simple and easy to implement in the classroom. But it's a really great way to celebrate that accomplishment. And I know that we're getting close to the end of the school year here for most of us in the States, but it's a really great way to encourage a little bit of celebration for little goals. And so it makes students more excited to continue learning. Now, goal setting, why is it important? It really does. It gives that focus. I gave that example of training for a marathon where it gives the students an ability to really hone in on a specific thing they want to do that week and it or even month, depending on how long your goal is going to be set. But it gives them a really good way to focus their intention. Also, it centers our learning around what the students want to learn and what their intention is. Too often we just tell the students, we want to meet these learning targets or we have this objective we want to learn, but sometimes it's becomes disconnected from the student. And so using Freckle to be able to set goals allows the students to really have some ownership of what they want to learn and what they want to accomplish, and that can be really powerful. So I took a couple screen grabs here of the student dashboard, just so you can see if you've never noticed this goal setting feature before, which I actually didn't know it existed until the day it launched. And my students actually told me, and now my students are actually very excited. First thing Monday morning, they set their goals. So at the top of the screen there's the beginning dashboard, and it tells your students when they log in on Monday or the first time they've logged in that week that they haven't set a goal. And the nice thing is this is something that students can do very quickly. It doesn't take a lot of time. But the first time we started talking about this in my classroom, I actually kind of drew it out and I had them log in and we talked about what they were seeing and what a goal actually was. But they have the opportunity to set currently 2 different goals. There's a third coming, but it's not available yet. But they have the opportunity to set a goal if they want to focus on answering the number of questions they're going to be answering or getting a high accuracy. And so what I've done in my classroom is as we've progressed throughout the year with talking about goal setting, we talk about the differences and why you might want to focus on answering more questions or why you might be wanting to focus on getting higher accuracy. One thing that I have loved to see in my classroom is I've loved to see that my students have really taken ownership over noticing which goal either 1 earns them the most coins because they're being successful, or 2 allows them to focus and learn more. So I love to be able to tell my students that if they're going to focus on answering questions, we want to make sure that we aren't just ignoring accuracy, but that maybe that allows them to really focus and hone in, and they want to continue growing in levels. And a lot of my students really, the ones that are driven to pick answering questions, really love to see that they progress through the levels quickly. And as you know, if you've been working with Freckle, either in math or ELA, if they answer more questions, they're going to grow. Versus I have a student in particular that noticed that they were really struggling in Freckle, but then they were just struggling in school in general, and they wanted to speed through their work. And we know we all have one of those students where they just kind of speed through. I like to tell them they're my speed racer. Um, but they often will struggle with answering questions, but not getting them right, and not really understanding why they're not getting them right. And so I'll actually focus students on getting higher accuracy if they are one of those students, and they'll start seeing they're more successful, or they're actually seeing growth. They might just need to slow down, and that high accuracy doesn't really focus on the questions, but often the correctness or the growth or learning that needs to happen there. As well as they do get to select how many coins they're earning, so how many times they have to accomplish the accuracy, or how many questions they're specifically getting. And so it's kind of a nice way for them to pick their reward. So I actually have students, and you would think they would just pick automatically the highest reward. But one of my students actually I started asking her why she started clicking the lower reward. And she's told me she was being realistic. She realized that for the last few weeks, she was picking the highest reward and wasn't earning it. And then she started kind of slowly realizing that in order to really be realistic with the reward she wanted to earn, she also had to be realistic with how she learns and the time that it takes her to master certain skills. Now let's go ahead and take a quick look at the student and teacher dashboard, just so you can kind of see it in action. I'm going to go ahead and jump out of this slide deck and into the student dashboard. So right now I'm actually logged in as a student, and so this is exactly what they see. When they are logging in for the first time, they see this set goal for this week. And so the nice thing is the students can work, so you don't have to worry about if you don't have time to set up the goals initially first thing in the morning, they can actually work through progress, but it does remind them. And the cool thing is when they click on setting that goal for this week, they get to choose. So for right now, let's go ahead and pick the high accuracy. So the student can pick the high accuracy, and then they can actually look. They ask, okay, we want a target of 80% accuracy, which we know as teachers is showing progress, it's showing growth. I wouldn't expect students, and a lot of students will ask, well, why not 100% accuracy? And I always return back, if we are learning, we're going to make mistakes and not be perfect. So that's a conversation I've had with my students in the classroom. And it is a great student conversation to have as you're developing this conversation of goal setting and accuracy with your students. And the cool thing is when I started talking about this with my students, after they just let them play with this goal setting process, we talked about, if I'm working in my classroom every single day, what's going to be realistic for me? So a lot of students, when they first started working, automatically picked the 8 times, which most of my students, knowing that in my classroom we use Freckle every single day, that was realistic for a lot of my students. But we started discussing kind of being that just right, or that Goldilocks zone of your goal. And so I generally let my students kind of pick their goal and don't really have a teacher discussion with their goal setting until we look kind of at some trends and patterns. So a lot of my students started realizing that this goal was too easy and they were already getting it, and it wasn't as many coins as their friends that maybe might have picked a harder goal. And so they kind of start realizing, depending on how it works in your classroom or how frequent they're using Freckle, they'll start the students are so smart, they'll start figuring out what goal is going to be one that they can achieve out. And then they also start shooting for that higher goal because there is that higher reward. And so their rewards are listed down here. And so once they select that goal, it tells them this is your goal, and that it's a week-to-week basis. So they have essentially Sunday to Sunday to be able to get that reward. In my classroom, most of my students don't use Freckle outside of school hours just because of technology access. But the great thing is they can also work on their goal even on Saturday. I've had students that haven't met their goal on Friday afternoon go home on Saturday and meet their goal, which is really neat. And so it tells them how they're progressing. Now, I'm going to jump into a student that actually has current data here. But when you log in, they actually show where their progress is. So this particular student has selected a goal about number of questions and that they want to answer 40 questions. And the great thing throughout the week, this progress bar changes so the students can clearly see that they're getting closer. Now, it does show this percentage here, but what I love is that most students are pretty intuitive that they're trying to fill up this bar. So if they don't even understand the concept of percentage, they can actually see visually that they are getting to the end here, or they're getting to the progress. And I love that it shows this kind of grayed out reward so they can still see what their reward is, but they haven't quite earned it yet. And the neat thing is that as soon as they earn that reward, it does show them, hey, you've earned it, and they earn it there, which is great, and an immediate feedback. Now, one thing that I do want to note is that you can actually check in with student goals. So you don't have to ask your students if they've made their goal yet. Frequently, when this is something new or a routine in your classroom, my students will tell me that they have finished their goal. So it's been pretty much routine now that my students will just tell me immediately. They'll raise their hand when they hit it, or they'll tell me when we're dismissing, hey, I made my goal already. But the nice thing is on the teacher dashboard, which I'm going to jump into here. This is just your teacher dashboard. I've logged in and I'm now on my activity feed. But the goal setting feature is for both math and ELA. So you can actually access this report in both areas. So I'm just going to go toggling down on this left-hand side, and I'm going to jump into the math reports. It just happens to be first. And the third report is the student goal setting. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that the goal students are setting is for both math and ELA practice. So if you're like me in the classroom and are essentially a Freckle junkie, I use Freckle for all subjects and use it all the time. So my students can pretty much meet these goals pretty quickly. But if you're only using math for a specific subject, or you're not using it regularly, it just might be something you want to keep in mind. But the nice thing is that any work that students are doing in Freckle, whether it be a adaptive practice, an assignment you've assigned them, moves them towards their goal. And this report is a quick snapshot to show you if students have made their goal yet. So if you were to look on the right-hand side here, it shows the status. And so I love that this is color-coded. So as a teacher, you can see red, they haven't met their goal, yellow, they're on their way there, and then there's this tealy green color that tells that they're almost there, and then the word complete, which we know they've met that goal. So this report, you can change the time period to either this current week or last week. And if you were to go ahead and want to see who's completed the goal first, you can click on status here and sort by completed and then going down. You'll notice that even just today, I've had several students that have already completed their goal, but then I also start going down and I can see, okay, this particular student, wow, she's almost at her goal, and just kind of be able to cheerlead and let them know that, hey, I know you're almost at your goal. Or even these students I meet with, my students in small group, I even can check in and say, hey, I noticed you met your goal in Freckle, and it just brightens their mood. And often even you might think, okay, the students met their goal, maybe they're going to check out the rest of the week. They always love to see how much further they can exceed their goal, or how many more questions they can earn. So that's never been a big issue with me in my classroom. You don't see students kind of giving up. One thing I also love to do on Thursday afternoons, right before kids are leaving, I like to check in with this report and kind of give those students the nudge that they need. So like students that either haven't started their goal, which these students, they've all been absent or haven't worked in Freckle for whatever reason this week. But I love to tell these students, like for example, the ones that are in this kind of yellow target, hey, I've noticed you're almost at your goal. I bet you can get there by the end of this week. And that kind of gives them that extra boost. Or even I've had students as they're almost leaving on a Friday afternoon and they're in this tealy color. Hey, you're almost at your goal. I wonder if you can log in sometime this weekend and see if you can make it. And it gives them that kind of boost and that encouragement to be able to notice that their goal is important to me and be able to kind of give them that boost to keep learning. Now, one thing I wanted to kind of point out is one of the reasons why this goal feature is so important is that it really gets those students involved in their learning. So one thing to make this the goal setting feature most powerful I've found is making Freckle a part of your regular routine. And so for me in my classroom, it's the first 15 minutes of the morning. They come in and it's designated Freckle work time. This is without a doubt whatever we are doing, regardless if the schedule is crazy or we have a class party in the afternoon, the first 15 minutes is designated Freckle work time. And that gives that students that assurance that they'll have that time to work in Freckle and be able to meet their goal. Because what I found is when we first started setting these goals, the students were really concerned they wouldn't have enough time to meet these goals, so they were setting their goals too low. And so they were getting those rewards, they were getting that feedback, which is really positive, but they were concerned. And I was asking them in small group or just kind of offhand when we had some time, hey, why did you set your goal for the lower part? And I've had that conversation and they said, oh, we don't know if we'll have enough time. And I had that conversation with my class that 15 minutes of designated Freckle work time is always in the morning. And they knew that from routine, but I wanted to make sure they knew that was also sacred time for me. And so I valued their time to be able to meet their goal. Also, just making sure that they have that choice of what they're working on has been extremely powerful. Now, we don't always have the time to make choice 100%. They get to choose anything they're working all the time. But what I love is that 15-minute time for me is they get to pick the content that they're working on or the area that they're working on. So I often will tell my students, I want you working in math, but you get to choose the domain. And that really is this wonderful feedback loop of giving choice and having them motivated to meet their goals. Now, the goal of getting the number of questions or the percentage of accuracy isn't an elaborate goal. It's not looking at the specific domain or specific area of math that they're maybe needing to work on or the content skill, but it really does give them the power of intention and their focus. And so what I've noticed, especially like one of my students is a really struggling reader, he hasn't shied away from the reading content. And actually when he's given choice for picking either math or ELA or science or social studies, he loves to read the articles on the on biographies. And when I've given him this choice, instead of having to harp on him on, oh, you need to, do this reading strategy and this and that, he's able to really focus, and his is accuracy. And so what I've noticed is it's focused him in his reading. And instead of getting overwhelmed, he has decided to slow down in his reading on his own. And I've watched him take his time answering those comprehension questions on his ELA articles a lot more because his goal has been getting high accuracy on his questions. So it's kind of a neat way there to be able to give him his self-guided feedback, as well as he has noticed his accuracy has improved. And it's been something that has been intentional with his goal that he has picked. Also, I really love that with Freckle and this kind of student-centric point of view, by giving them practice on a daily basis in their own area. And I've listed some things on the screen of kind of different ideas where you can choose to give them choice. It doesn't necessarily have to be a free-for-all, just work on Freckle, but it allows them to really take ownership of what they want to learn and how that's going to translate in their learning that week. Also, with this goal setting practice, I've referenced that I've just continued to talk with my class. We've had class discussions about our focus, our goals, and that open dialogue, at least with my classroom and the classrooms that I've talked with across training instances, or even in my own campus on my school site, we've noticed that as we continue to talk about goals and us having a goal and you having a goal, the students get really excited about making that progress. So one thing that I have done with this goal setting feature and that simple report that I was showing you on the classroom or the teacher dashboard, every single day at the end of the day, I open up that report and I look for any students that have completed their weekly Freckle goal. And on my whiteboard, I started writing Freckle go-getters on my screen, on the whiteboard, and I list the names of the students that have completed the goal this week. And the funny thing is, the very first time I did this, I didn't even point it out. I took a pink expo marker and just started doing it. And the neat thing is, my students started realizing, hey, my name's up on the board. And I started wondering, and they started looking, oh, well, I made my Freckle goal. They started making that connection and talking about it among themselves. And it really started amping up the class and really kind of having students cheerlead themselves, but also each other to meet their goal. And it's kind of neat. Every single day I start doing that. And I've noticed the students will ask to get on Freckle on their own time, or they'll do Freckle at home because they're really driven to just see their name written up on the whiteboard. It's a very simple technique and it doesn't take very much time, and you're not having to go scour through things or really dive into those reports, because I know we all have very strapped time, but it allows you to kind of see how students are progressing, and they love being acknowledged for their goal. And the funny thing is, I started then taking a picture and I sending a picture home of the people that made their Freckle goal at the end of the week, and sending it home via Class Dojo that I use, or any emailing ability, or even just simply taking the picture and celebrating sometimes really gets them amped up. But it's a very simple way to help celebrate that student progress. Because one thing that I have noticed, and it's strengthened our conversations around goals, is finding little ways to celebrate those goals. Now, it doesn't have to be complicated. And honestly, I tell my students the learning is the actual reward. We're just celebrating our learning and our work towards our learning. And so the students have really gotten into that mindset of realizing that the learning and the growth is your actual reward, your long-term reward. So I'm not handing out things, and I'm not trying to, make them earn candy or those types of things. It's just the simple ways of celebrating their success and acknowledgement of hard work. And I think that's the biggest thing I have had as an aha, is it's not necessarily something they're earning. It's just that acknowledgement that yes, you're working hard, and yes, we see you. So it's a really very simple way to do that. Also, just another way that I have seen this goal setting feature be very successful is that my students have noticed that there's certain students that haven't been acknowledged, or they're not as acknowledged as frequently with making their goal. And so using those peer tutors, or even just encouraging, hey, how can we support each other, provides another level of support and encouragement throughout the program. And so that's just something that I've been working with, of how to inspire students, but not necessarily myself, including other partners, and talking of, hey, how could you help and be a helper? If you've already made your goal, how could you help others make their goal too? And so it increases that kind of connectivity in the classroom, as well as just that increased level of understanding that we are all working to help support each other in learning. As well as just continuing to display and talk about Freckle growth has been something that has really engaged students and made them really excited. But other than that, I hope that you guys are going to be working through that goal setting feature, maybe playing with it a little bit and opening up that dialogue in your classroom about how to set goals and really inspire your students to learn with Freckle. If there's any help that I can provide, I put my email up here. Feel free to reach out. But also the support of Freckle, the support team at Freckle is amazing. They're quick to respond. So if you're ever having problems or trying to find something and it's not working, they're really great there as well. Also, if you wanted to follow me on social media, I do share a lot about teaching and Freckle and using Freckle in the classroom on my social media, as well as I do have classroom accounts, and they talk about their goals and different things they're doing, highlighting Freckle fairly regularly on their social media accounts as well. But thank you for joining me here. I do really appreciate that you guys took this time to spend some quality time with me and talk about Freckle and goal setting. And I really cannot wait to hear if you guys are using this in your classroom.
Thank you so very much, Laura. We have a few questions that we received in the chat box. So I'm going to quickly answer those, and then I'd like to direct everyone to support@freckle.com. So if your questions weren't answered, our support team will get back to you promptly. But one of the questions that came up was just a review one of what are the goals that your students can set in Freckle. And again, we have two goals that students can set. One is related to number of questions answered, and the other is related to accuracy. And the team is working on releasing a third goal related to levels soon. And then the next question, which is a great question, is wondering about this goal setting feature and if it's available to both free edition and premium edition users. And yes, it is. So both free and premium edition students, when they log in each week, will be prompted to set a goal. And finally, if you have any other questions related to the premium edition of Freckle, go ahead and check out our plans page at freckle.com/plans, or feel free to contact our support team at support@freckle.com. And with that, I want to thank Laura so very much for your time. You were wonderful. Have a great day, everyone.